Okay, so let's look at this table here. So firstly, you need to know the definition for aggregate expenditure. It should equal to consumption plus investment plus government purchase plus net export. So based on this formula, you can simply add up these four numbers here and get the aggregate expenditure. So if you do the calculation, you can see that the aggregate expenditure for here should be 9,600. And what do we mean by unplanned change in inventories? So the definition for unplanned change in inventories, unplanned change in inventory. Simply using like a simplified word for it for each initial here. So it equals the real GDP minus aggregate expenditure. So for this very first row, we could see that the real GDP is 9,000 and the aggregate expenditure is 9,600. So the end plan change in inventory should be negative 600. Okay, and the same thing for the second row. If we add up consumption, investment, government purchase, and net export, we can get the aggregate expenditure. If you do the calculation, it should be 10,400. And unplanned change in inventory should equal to real GDP minus aggregate expenditure, so it should be negative 400. Okay, so when we finish the first two rows, the question comes, because for the last three rows, we don't really know the consumption there. But in the question, there is a sentence very important. It says that assume that the value of marginal propensity of consumption does not change as real GDP change. So marginal propensity for consumption equals the change of consumption over change of real GDP. So now we have already know 2 years consumption there. So the change of real GDP in these 2 years is 1,000, right? And you can check that for each of these 2 years, the change of real GDP is always 1,000. And we have seen that the change of consumption in these 2 years is 800. So because the marginal propensity of consumption is always a constant, so definitely we know that for the third one here, it should be 9,200 because the change of consumption here must be 800 also. And same thing for this one should be 10,000, also 800 difference in consumption. For this one is 10,800. Okay, so we get the consumption here, and if we sum them up, we would get the aggregate expenditure. If you do the calculation, this one should be 11,200, and this one should be 12,000, and this one should be 12,800. Okay, in addition, about what is marginal propensity for consumption, it equals the change of consumption over the change of real GDP. The change of consumption we have seen is 800, and the change of real GDP it is 8,000. So basically, the marginal propensity for consumption is 0.8. Okay, and also for this rate, endpoint change in inventory equals real GDP minus aggregate expenditure. So if you do the calculation, it's negative 200. This is 0. This is 200. And the last question would be, when would we achieve the equivalent real GDP? So we know that the equilibrium achieves when the real GDP equals aggregate expenditure. When it equals, we can see that it's actually here. So here we have the exchange point and unplanned change in inventory 0, and the aggregate expenditure and also real GDP. Both of them are 12,000. So in that case, we can achieve equivalent in real GDP.